right, so I don't know about you, but have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were expecting one thing and you got something totally different? I'm sure you've been in that situation before. I've found myself in that situation multiple times throughout life. One that comes to mind is back when I first started student ministry. I was interning at a church, working with the student ministry, and we had gotten all the students together at the local skating rink. We were doing a Halloween kind of party, get together, costume party, and we were hanging out. We had all sorts of games lined up that we were doing, competing against the kids and the students, and leaders versus students and students versus students and all that fun stuff. And I remember I got volunteered to participate in the caramel apple eating contest, and I was all about it. This was over in East Tennessee. If you've ever been to Gatlinburg, walk the strip up and down the strip in Gatlinburg, you know they got caramel apples everywhere, peanuts, chocolate, all sorts of toppings and all that fun stuff. They kind of go overboard with it. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can eat some caramel apples. And so I remember they were lined up. There's 4 caramel apples, and the goal was just to eat one after another and be the first one to finish all 4. And so I'm rolling through the first one, the second one. I'm just wearing this kid out, and we get to the 4th apple. And I look down and I realize that this caramel apple looks a little bit different from all the other ones. It's much bigger than the other caramel apples. It's shaped a little bit different, but I'm like, what the heck? I'm here. We're in the championship round. Let's do this thing. And so I remember picking up that caramel apple and just taking a huge bite out of it. And as soon as I bit into it, I realized this is not a caramel apple. This is a caramel covered onion. And I just remember taking a step back and just like spitting it out on the table, and just the combination of caramel and the onion was just disgusting, especially when I was expecting an apple. And then I remember I looked over and I was going against this 8th grade girl, and she was just wearing this thing out, man. She ate the entire thing. There was nothing left but the stick. Normally you eat a caramel apple and you got the core left. This girl ate the entire onion like it was nothing. And I just remember sitting there and just kind of looking at her and looking at this caramel apple, and just that taste in my mouth when I was expecting an apple and I got an onion, and it was just absolutely disgusting, right? When you find yourself, when you're expecting one thing and you get something else, you kind of start questioning and asking yourself all these things that pop up in your mind, like, how did I end up here? What decisions did I make? What mistakes did I make to find myself in this situation, and where do we go from here? And so today, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be looking at life and what we do when life leaves us questioning. Let's join Chris for part 6 of our series, Out of My Mind.
For me to sit here and talk to you through this method is an excruciating experience. And it's not because of you, no offense. And it's not because I don't like to do this. It's not that. It's when I go back and watch, like what you're seeing right now, it is a horrifying situation for me. I want to believe, in my mind, I just believe I sound better than this. My weird voice, I believe that my words make more sense. I believe they're more impactful. In my mind, it plays out. And then when I look, I'm like, I know I look better than that, because that's just not, there's something wrong. And so it is a difficult, in my mind, it all seems so much better. You ever do that? Do you ever have things in your mind that you picture one way, but then it plays out a different way and it drives you a little bit crazy? In my mind, when I lay out a plan for anything, I see it playing out just right. Whatever it is, if it's a hobby, if it's a vacation, everything, it's picturesque. And then sometimes my reality doesn't match up. Maybe you don't ever struggle with that, but I'm not alone in this. Matter of fact, watch this video. You'll see some people who do it the right way, and then some people who have a lot more reality based on theirs. Watch this. Well, those fails, that's kind of the story of my life. In my brain, it looks so picturesque, so video worthy, and in my reality, it's more of a bloopers reel. I don't know if you ever feel that way with yours, but man, I've got too many examples that I can't ignore. It's not just in this regard that it happens. It's not just what we're doing in our sports or our recreation or whatever the things we see on that video. It happens in other areas of life too. As a matter of fact, we're in a series called Out of My Mind, and the whole concept is there are things that are in my mind that if I don't get out of my mind, they're going to drive me out of my mind. And they're lies, and we've been tearing into them one after another. This week, the lie that we're trying to focus on and do away with is built around this issue of my faith isn't strong enough. My faith isn't strong enough. Now, a lot of times people don't feel that way till they feel that way. Often when faith begins, we don't understand a lot about it, and we have the faith we have, and it's all we know. But often we encounter something that comes into our life that we didn't see coming, and often that's doubt. It's questions. It's fears. It is when we reach a point that we go, maybe my faith isn't strong enough, and that's what we want to tackle today. And by the way, maybe this is right where you're sitting right now, where you have kind of bought into the God thing, you have followed Jesus, you have made statements, you've done things, and now you find yourself questioning, what in the world is God even doing? Where is he? It feels like he's vacated my life. I feel so alone. I feel so overwhelmed. I've got so many doubts. I've got so many questions. And if that's you, we're not going to try to beat you up with that today. As a matter of fact, we want to define what that is and figure out how we can grow better from it. You may be surprised with the results. There's this beautiful story in the Bible. It's really not beautiful. It is intriguing. And matter of fact, the person that it's based on, even if you're kind of new to faith or new to church or the Bible or anything, I guarantee you've heard of this guy. John chapter 20, verse 24. Let me just tell you what's going on. Jesus has lived. He has been crucified. Perhaps you've heard of that. He has risen again. That's like Easter. Okay, we've got Christmas. He lived then, and Easter, he's risen. And then Jesus appeared to many of his followers, and he did it as evidence of his being alive, that he had power over death and the grave. Well, that's where we find ourselves in John chapter 20, and he has appeared to his disciples, the 12 disciples, except it didn't go quite the way all of them thought. Matter of fact, it says this in verse 24. One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. That's a pretty important piece. I don't know where he was. I wish the Bible told us that, because now my imagination just runs wild. I don't know if his family called and said the internet's down and we can't stream Netflix. I don't know what we're going to do. And he ran home to try to unplug it and plug it back in, because that's all anybody really knows how to do when it doesn't work. I don't know if that's what he was doing. I don't know if he ran to Chick-fil-A because that just sounded delicious. And doesn't it sound delicious? And that might have been it. I don't know if he just didn't want to get out of bed. I don't know what was going on. Maybe he had a COVID scare and was getting a test done. Who knows? But what I do know is that he wasn't there. And they told him these words, "We have seen the Lord." They're tripping. They're freaked out. They said, "We were here in this room. Jesus showed up." Jesus, I mean the real Jesus, the not dead Jesus, alive Jesus. He showed up. Thomas's response could have been like, "Dude, that's amazing. I can't believe it. You've got to be kidding me." But that wasn't his response. As a matter of fact, he didn't even hint toward it. He goes to surly Thomas in a hurry. He says, but he replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands and put my fingers into them and place my hand into the wound in his side." He immediately goes to, I am not buying that. I don't care what you guys say, not believing it. Until I can see visual evidence, I'm going to stay a skeptic. I ain't buying it. Now, I don't know what was going on with Thomas. Wouldn't it be curious to know all the stuff below the surface? Let me just say this. Usually when people deal with great doubts and insecurities or questions or fears, often there is something below the surface that's triggering that. What we do know is that Thomas was having a moment. I mean, these guys are like, yes, and he's like, wrong. He was having a moment, but it wasn't his last moment. It wasn't his only moment. This doesn't define Thomas's story. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about Thomas. Thomas wasn't a guy of weak faith. As a matter of fact, just a few chapters earlier, there's a little encounter where Jesus told the disciples what he was going to be doing, and I think Thomas misunderstood a little bit. And he ends up talking to the other guys, and he says, listen, Jesus is going there to visit at another place, and it probably means we're all going to lose our life, but I still think we should go with him. We ought to be faithful. We ought to just go with him, even if it means we lose our life. Thomas wasn't a guy that was faithless. Thomas wasn't a guy who didn't get it. Thomas wasn't a guy who was just a wuss, or he just wasn't that bought in. He was fully bought in. Thomas was a man of faith. What led him to this point, I don't know. Maybe part of his struggle was that he envisioned in his mind this video-worthy story of Jesus, where Jesus came and he was a carpenter and nobody knew who he was, and he taught and people listened, and he did miracles and people followed, and they took over the world and everybody was changed and they all lived happily ever after. That's everybody's faith story dream, right? That's the way it's going to work. That's the one we often put on videos at church. These people went through a lot, and then one day they found Jesus, and then they all lived happily ever after, and the video shuts off because if you kept running, you'd realize a lot of those people went through difficult times even after Jesus. And so maybe he is pretty disillusioned that the guy he followed and was willing to give his life for allowed himself to be killed. He died. That is not the picturesque video-worthy moment. Maybe he was disillusioned. Maybe he also felt left out. I mean, he wasn't there. Jesus showed up, but he wasn't there. Maybe he felt like the guy was just out. He was alone. He already had struggles. He had already run away when Jesus was crucified, like all the disciples did. So he was already feeling like a loser. Then he felt disillusioned. Then he felt alone or left out. I don't know. Maybe all those triggered his doubts. But I'm just telling you, when I have doubts in my life, when you have doubts in your life, we have questions that seem overwhelming, when circumstances feel bigger than our ability to cope with them, often there's underlying issues. Well, I think there was for him. Let me just tell you, if you're going to get past doubt, there's a couple things we'll mention today that might help you. The first one that Thomas teaches us is you need to keep showing up. It's really fascinating. The next words we read, verse 26, 8 days later, so just fast forward 8 days, this is what we find out. The disciples were back together again, and this time Thomas was with them. That's an interesting little note. They're back together and he's with them. Let me tell you, there is a tendency when we go through doubt, when we go through questions, when we go through uncertainty in our life, when we go through things we just don't understand, there's a tendency to pull away from things that can help us. There's a tendency to pull away from a community of faith. There's a tendency to pull away from people who speak faith into our life, who are fighting to live out their faith, and isolate. That is a really normal thing. Matter of fact, almost every time. That is the course of humanity. That he didn't do that. The next words we read is 8 days later, they were all together and Thomas was with him. He kept showing up. The reason this story ends really well is because of that one moment. He had a choice to pull away and run away and isolate and live frustrated, or put himself back in a position where good things could happen. He showed up. He kept showing up. The doors were locked, it says, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. He just appeared. Peace be with you, he said. That's a ridiculously obvious statement because they had to be freaking out when he's not there and then all of a sudden he is there. That would freak you out. It ought to be peace be with you, and here's some new underwear you can change into because you're going to need that. But that's the way it worked. All of a sudden in this moment, we find that Thomas had showed back up, and as a result, Thomas was in the right place at the right time when Jesus showed up again. Here's the reality, that he still had doubts. When he entered that room that evening, he still had doubts. He still had questions. He still had disillusionment. He still had frustration, but he put himself in the right place. And when you keep showing up and putting yourself in the right place, often you encounter just what you need. Here's the ugly truth, or here's the beautiful truth. You can drag your doubts to God, because if you don't, those same doubts will drag you away. You get to choose. You don't get to choose always if you have doubts, but you do get to choose what you do with your doubts. One of the things he did with his is he kept showing up. He drug his doubts to the right place, and you can drag your doubts to God. He will not hate you for it. You can drag your doubts to God so they don't drag you away. Boy, that's one we ought to tattoo in our brain. For a lot of us, we kind of have this image, like with the videos, the wonderful video and then the fail video. some of us have this vision that when it comes to faith, that we're going to reach a point someday where we place our trust in Jesus, and then everything that happens after that is going to be blue skies. It's going to be balmy, beautiful days. It's going to be butterflies and rainbows and unicorns and Skittles. That's what it's going to be like forevermore. It's all blue skies. And then what a lot of us encounter are doubts. And then a lot of us have kind of grown up in our minds. I don't know if it's been taught or it's been assumed. I don't know how we get there. That the opposite of doubts are fear, or the opposite of faith is doubts. And when we get to that point, we often see it goes from blue skies to all clouds. That I've lost my faith. Can I just tell you this? Faith and doubt can coexist. As a matter of fact, they always coexist. If you're having doubts, it doesn't mean you have lost your faith. It may, however, mean that your doubts are overwhelming your faith. And there's a big difference. Maybe the more accurate picture wouldn't be all blue skies or all clouds. It would actually look more like this. That is the reality, that in every blue sky there are some clouds. In every faith journey, there are some doubts, there are some questions, and it is so important to recognize that. As you realize that, here's what you need to know, that your doubts don't disqualify you from being a person of faith. They actually define you as a person of faith. If there were no doubts, it wouldn't be called faith. It would just be called certainty, assurance. Everybody deals with doubts to some degree. Now, some of us try to paint ourselves in a picture and go, nope, we're fine, we never, but those people are called liars. Or they're just so outside their own reality, they won't even recognize it. We all deal with doubts. It's not a matter of if you deal with doubts, it's a matter of how you deal with doubts. And the one thing we know for sure is that when you deal with doubts, you need to keep showing up. Keep putting yourself in a position where God can help you through them. Drag your doubts to God before your doubts drag you away. Put yourself in a community of faith. Be around people whose faith is real and active, imperfect, but real. That is how you work your way through doubts and land in a healthy position. So that's the first thing we find out from Thomas. He had doubts. It didn't mean he wasn't a person of faith. The important thing is to recognize that he kept showing up. Second thing he did is he remembered his reasons. That's the second one we'll give. The next verse I think is so fascinating. Verse 27, then he said to Thomas, that's Jesus, the one who showed up in the room, peace be still. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand in the wound on my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. I want you to believe. It's so interesting what Jesus did and what Jesus didn't do. If it had been any of us, any of the fatherly image in me would have said, where were you last time? If you had been where you should have been, I don't know what you were thinking. But that's not what he did. That is not how he landed. As a matter of fact, Jesus didn't judge Thomas. Actually, he restored Thomas. Man, the lesson we can learn for how to deal with each other when people have doubts and when people have struggles, they don't need your judgment. There's all of this garbage going through their mind that leads to judgment that's not necessary. When Jesus had every right to judge him, where were you? Why are you doubting? Haven't I done enough for you? I died for you. Is that not enough? Where were you? He didn't. He just gave him a chance to be restored. I think that is fascinating. If you want to know what God is like, man, there is a snapshot for you in this beautiful historic account. Thomas's response was, my Lord and my God. It's one of the original OMG moments. He recognized immediately. You know what he did? Is he remembered the reasons he ever followed Jesus in the first place. That he is trustworthy. That I can put my faith in. My faith wasn't in a something. My faith was in a someone. And that you are that someone, my Lord and my God. It's this moment. By the way, it is so transformative for Thomas that it lasted him the rest of his life. We'll figure that out. That's kind of how we'll close in just a minute. Going through really difficult times in my life, I've had friends who have spoken truth to me that when I kept showing up, the way I've gotten through those is not because I was strong, not because I was smart. It's because I put myself in places. I had a friend who told me years ago, if you're around me long, you've probably heard me say this before, because I ring it in my own mind over and over because it's helped me so much. Sometimes when when I was a kid, I don't know, now I have a little lamp beside my bed, but evidently we weren't ready for that when I was a kid. But I had a light switch way over there and a bed way over there. And at night you turn it off, and the longer you live somewhere, the easier it gets. But what you do when you turn the light off and you're now still got to get over there and it's dark, is you remember in the dark what you saw in the light. You kind of play out in your mind what's going on. You go, I've got about 5 or 6 steps, and then you reach down and you try to hit the end of the bed, then you jump in. You remember in the dark what you saw in the light. I think that is something we all need. When doubts come in, it is so important not to focus. I can't control the doubts if they come. I can't always control the questions that come. I can always control what I do. I can choose to focus on what I know and not what I don't know. And the way I often get through doubts, I keep showing up and I remember the reasons. I focus and affirm on what I do know to be true. Here's the truth of it. You are going to have things you don't understand. Hey, if you've lived through the last 2 years and there's not some stuff, you go, what the heck is going on? Why? Here, I've got some whys. Why do bad things happen to people who are trying so hard? Why do you see some people who try so little and have good things happen? I don't get it. Where is God when the little child gets sick, and why does any little child ever have to get sick? Why is it I'm praying and asking, but not all the things I'm asking are happening, and they seem like they're not self-absorbed, they actually seem like they're the right things? Where is God in that? If you never have any of those questions, you're not human. We all do. Now, some people deal with them differently, but we all have those. There's going to be things you don't understand, but in the things I don't understand, there are still some things I do believe, that I can affirm, that I still feel sure about. Even if I can't understand that, I can't understand that. I do believe that God is good even when things are bad around me. I can believe that. I affirm that. I believe that God is in control even when it doesn't feel like control is happening around me right now, and it feels like a lot of things are spinning out of control. I can affirm that. I believe that God still answers prayers even if He's not giving me the answers I want or at the speed I want. I can still believe. Hey, I can tell you this. I believe that God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, and that He didn't send Him into the world to condemn the world just like He didn't condemn Thomas, but to save the world and offer hope to the world. I believe that. I believe that Jesus was God in flesh, God in a bod, and He came to proclaim hope and forgiveness to everyone who would listen. And it's come all the way down to me. I believe that. I believe that Jesus is not just another fictional character, but I believe He is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no person can come to the Father except through Him. I believe that. I believe that He gave His life. He was crucified on a cross. He was buried for 3 days and is in a tomb. And He raised Himself from the dead to prove that He had power over both life and death. I believe after He did that, that He historically documented that He appeared to over 500 of His followers just to help us be sure that it wasn't just a hoax. I believe that. The people who believed that gave their life, they believed that so much. I believe that He gave His Spirit so that we could build His church. And He said that when He was in the middle of it, even the gates of hell would not be able to stand against it. While I may still have doubts and I may have questions, I believe that that is who God is and what God has done. I believe that Jesus is alive today, and He sits at the right hand of His Father, and He advocates on behalf of people who have doubts and fears and questions just like me and you. I believe that He has all power and all authority in heaven and in earth. I believe that He gives His Spirit to people like me, and He hears me when I pray, and He empowers me to do life, and He forgives me of my stupidity and my sin. I believe that Jesus cares for me and loves me every day of my life when I don't deserve it, which is every day. He loves me. I believe He loved me yesterday. I believe He loves me today, and I am convinced He will love me tomorrow. And I believe there will be a day when He returns in all power and all glory, and that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. I believe there will be a day. I affirm these truths in my life because this is how I deal with it, with my fears and my doubts and my questions. I believe there will be a day when he will dry every tear, and he will make right every wrong, and he will heal every wound, and he will give us the blue sky life that we are looking for. But in the meantime, we all deal with doubts. We all deal with frustrations. We all deal with, I thought it was going to look like that, but instead it looks like that. I thought I was going to be on a highlight reel, but I made a bloopers reel. I think all of us deal with it. If that is you and you're struggling with a little crisis of faith or a crisis of questions right now, can I just say to you, keep showing up. Hey, the fact you're watching this today is a step in the right direction. Way to go. Keep putting yourself in a community of faith. Be a part of a community where other people are living out their faith, even broken, imperfect people who are still fighting to allow God to be real in their life. Also, affirm what you can. I believes are really important. You may need to write some of those down. I can't always control where my doubts are, but I can always choose to affirm what I believe to be true and not let those doubts overwhelm me. I need to remember that my doubts don't disqualify me. Actually, they define me as a person of faith. Every person of faith goes through doubts. I can't see myself that my faith is not going to get me through because I have doubts, because the truth is everybody with faith has doubts. I can drag my doubts to God so they don't drag me away. As long as I keep dragging them to God, I will find my way through. And so will you. If you're completely overwhelmed today, can I just tell you, don't lose heart. Keep dragging, but Chris, I know, keep dragging them, keep showing up. Keep remembering your reasons. Also, remember when you don't feel like you can get to God, it's okay because he'll show up where you are. That's what he did for Thomas. Thomas didn't go find Jesus. Literally, he just put himself where people of faith were, and God showed up, and he will show up wherever you are. You may feel like you're outside his reach, but I promise you, you're not the first, and you are not the last, and you are not outside his reach. Remember the reasons. Remember that it's not just about you and your faith, but it is about the object of your faith. It's not about how strong is my faith. It is about the one in whom I place my faith. That's what determines your outcome. It's not because your faith's so strong that you're ever going to get through. It's because the one you place your faith in is enough. He is good enough, he is strong enough, and man, is he persistent enough to see you through. Last thing, and we'll kind of shut down. I think it's so interesting that at the end of the story, the last words that we hear from Thomas, as Jesus presents, he didn't say, "You are Lord, you are God." He didn't just say, "Wow, you were right." Interesting the way he turned the phrase. He said, "My Lord and my God." Can I tell you the end of Thomas' story? Thomas was so moved by this day, his faith was so bolstered by this day, that Thomas actually took the gospel far away from where they were, all the way ended up in India. And he was a person who shared the gospel to people who had never heard that far away. As a matter of fact, he ended up giving his life as a martyr for sharing his faith there. Not only had he run away, not only had he had doubts, not only did we somehow stupidly name him Doubting Thomas, that we've remembered for thousands of years, but the truth is he was a heroic Thomas who followed Jesus in the first place, went through his doubts and disillusionment, and finished his life so convinced that Jesus was his Lord and his God that he actually gave his life for it. And for a lot of us, maybe the problem is that we look at the story of Jesus, we look at the accounts of Jesus, and we say, I do believe there is a Jesus, I do believe there is a God. But what defines it for a lot of people that maybe needs to happen, and maybe this is your story. It's not that you've never been to church. If you're watching this, I mean, you're committed to some level of at least checking it out. But maybe today is the day you need to move from believing there is a God, maybe believing that Jesus did live, that Jesus did die for you, and move to the point where you say, my Lord and my God. Not my because you own them, but because you surrender yourself under their authority. That, by definition, that is salvation. It is when I recognize myself as not enough, and recognize Jesus' love and his sacrifice as enough. And I surrender myself that you're my Lord, you're in charge, you are my God, you are greater than me, and I choose to follow you. If you will accept me, I just wonder if maybe that's a decision you need to make today. And if it is, you can just pray this prayer. Many of us in this world today have reached a point, and I don't think it's the words you utter with your mouth, but I think it is the attitude and the intentions of your heart to say, God, I know, maybe this is your words today, I know that you are God. I accept the fact that Jesus came and lived a perfect life to die on behalf of imperfect people like me. If you'll forgive my sins, I am certainly willing to accept your forgiveness and surrender myself to you. Maybe your words to God today need to be this: my Lord and my God. And if you pray that prayer, if you walk through that process and cross that line of faith where it's not just faith that's heard of, but faith that's experienced, I so celebrate with you today. I am so glad you've chosen. It does not mean all blue skies, but it does mean you'll never have a day that God is not with you, and for that we celebrate. For all of us, if you're going through a time of doubts, don't give up. God will not abandon you. He will not leave you behind. He will not be intimidated if you drag your doubts to him. They will not drag you away, and he will see you through. And that's a reason to look forward to another week of life serving God. Hey, listen, we'll wrap up our series Out of Your Mind next week. Between now and then, hey, may the God who chose to give his life for you, may he be enough for you to recognize that you can believe and he will see you through. Have a great week.